Hello and welcome to Catholic Answers Live. I'm Cy Kellett, your host. Big Friday show for you. Second hour, Dr. Stacy Trasenkos will be here, and we'll do faith and science. If you've got questions about faith and science, it's always fun to ask those of Stacy, and we always have a good time when she's here. This hour, Trent Horn joins us with tips for defending the faith. If you'd like tips for defending the faith, give us a call, 888-318-7884, 888-318-7884. Trent Horn, of course, is the most, I don't want to say successful. That's the wrong word. The most, not brilliant. Brilliant is not the word. The best-selling, that's it. The best-selling author
persistent.
Persistent, yes, that's true.
Impervious to criticism.
I don't know that that's true. I don't know. I think I've seen you take criticism gracefully before. Trent, thanks for being here with us.
Well, thank you for having me, Cy. Yeah, I'm very excited, actually. We're preparing, it's kind of hard. I've said this for a while now, the second edition of my book, Persuasive Pro-Life. But I'm looking at all the galley proofs, and the editorial department has told me they would like to get the book out for June, commemorating the first year anniversary of the Dobbs decision that overturned Roe. And so I completely reworked Persuasive Pro-Life. It was a book I wrote back in 2014. And I've updated the statistics. I've added more arguments. I've ironically decreased the book in length, but I've added more because after writing,
you're a better writer.
Yeah, I've written 10 books. Like when you have kids, right? You've got your first kid, then you got your ninth kid. By the time your first kid, you just make all of the mistakes on them, all the mistakes. And I'm the oldest. I know what that's like. By your ninth kid, you know what you're doing. You don't always remember their name or where they are, but you know what you're doing. It's similar with my books. I'm like, oh yeah, I wrote that book. I forgot about that one. So yeah, I think it'll be very helpful. And of course it includes updated arguments, works from defenders of legal abortion that were published in the past 10 years since I wrote Persuasive Pro-Life. I've addressed newer arguments that have been put forward. The book covers both the street level arguments and the higher level stuff. So you can find all of that. Persuasive Pro-Life, the post-Roe edition, that should be coming out next month, I believe.
Oh, congratulations! Good for you. That is great. And I don't know how that'll count though when we count up your books. If you've written,
I believe. Well, that should just be it is the first. Yes, I'm sorry, I'm hearing a little bit of an echo in my ear. I thought somebody else was chiming in, and it's me. I'm like, who's that annoying person? Oh no, it's me. What happened?
I'm that annoying person.
Oh no. I think it would still retain its place as a book I wrote. It's just been, it got a makeover. You know, it's still the same person. It's like if you go to the spa and you go to the gym and you shed a few pounds and you brighten your face, you're still you. You haven't become a completely new person. So it's still, it's still substantially the book I previously wrote. But it's gotten a makeover that people, I took its glasses off, I let its hair down. And
you pulled that one hairpin out?
Yeah, I think the book could now really be prom queen. Now it's really got a good chance for that.
Trent Horn, our guest, you're welcome to call. Tips for defending the faith, 888-318-7884. It is time to go to the phones. I got to talk to the video guys about something, though, Trent. Hang on. Is Trent's lighting all right? He looks like Billy Joel to me today. I don't think the lighting is. Doesn't he look like Billy Joel today? What is that about? He's way better looking than Billy Joel. I think you guys have messed up the lighting because he looks like Billy Joel today.
Careful, I'm going to bust out my keyboard, and I'm just going to do Piano Man. Callers, you need to wait. You need to wait a little bit.
Just do New York State of Mind. Let me see if it's really you, Trent. Just
the only one that's coming to my head right now is Only the Good Die Young, and
let's hope that's not
I'm
true.
Almost 40.
In your case,
I don't think I would make that now anymore.
Yeah, I think that's a lighting failure. There's something wrong with the lighting when you make Trent Horn look like Billy Joel. But I swear, he looks like Billy Joel today.
Maybe I'm just aging gracefully. That would be a wondrous thing.
So. You're aging musically. 888-318-7884. Sorry to take care of that business on the air, but it seemed urgent. It seemed like something that I shouldn't just gloss over, that Trent Horn suddenly looks like Billy Joel. Colin in Canada, listening on Catholic.com. That's our website, Catholic.com. Colin, we're glad you're here. Darren, could you push the button for me? Line 1, thank you. Colin, go ahead with your question for Billy Joel. Trent Horn. I'm sorry, for Trent Horn.
Hi, Trent. I was wondering if you could comment on the effectiveness of arguments against legal abortion based around the idea that it promotes lazy design decisions in public and medical policy and technology. For example, many people don't like abortion but don't know how to address the problems that lead people towards abortion. So the argument would essentially be that legal abortion perpetuates many of these challenges because it under-constrains the design space for those challenges. An analogy would be that an engineering design space for sending two men to the moon would not be fully explored if we don't specify that both of them need to come back alive.
Oh, I see. Yeah, so this would be a kind of secondary argument against abortion, almost a kind of practical argument or a utilitarian argument. And these kinds of arguments, I think, would only be effective if someone were resolutely unconcerned with the status of the unborn child. If they simply were not moved and believed abortion was a woman's right, and the unborn child does not have a right to life or the right to reside in his mother's womb, and you just can't move them from that position. I'd be open to finding any reason for someone to oppose legal abortion, even if it's a not great reason. At least it's a reason. And one of them might be that, look, even if you think abortion is someone's right, just because you have a right to do something, it doesn't mean the government should promote this thing. Government regulates things all the time that we would seem to have a right to access or engage. They regulate drugs for the sake of the common good. They regulate all sorts of things. Look, you're trying to get rid of gasoline-powered cars to deal with climate change. And so you could say, look, if abortion perpetuates a culture of violence, or if it prevents us, if we are promoting abortion because we want to facilitate people, well, sometimes the arguments go like, you can make a feminist argument against abortion by saying, I might put it this way, that abortion, a feminist argument against abortion would be that our culture believes that women can only be equal to men if they are physiologically like men. And so men can advance in careers because they have sex and don't get pregnant, while women basically have to be turned into men in order to have equality with men. And a feminist should say, no, women should be treated equally with men without having to become men by essentially getting rid of their fertility through contraception and abortion. And so by suppressing these things, you can make an argument saying, no, by continuing, if society allows abortion, it'll never allow us to create a society where women are actually valued for who they are as women and being given equal opportunities with men, and also valued for who they are as mothers, which is more important than any job that you could have. So I think that's one route that you could take. But ultimately, that would be a secondary argument for me. I would focus more on abortion should be illegal because it should be illegal to dismember innocent human beings. And that should surely apply to unborn children as it would apply to any born person. So that might be the route that I would go with it. But yeah, thank you very much for your call, Colin. And how about that? Thank you for all of our callers from our northern friends. Thanks for being here.
You spoke Canadian there for a minute. Colin, thanks very much. We'll take a quick break. We'll be right back with more. You have an opportunity to call right now because there are at least 3 lines open for Trent, and that doesn't usually happen, but maybe we surprised you that he's here. If you'd like some tips for defending the faith, 888-318-7884, 888-488-31-TRUTH. Right back with more. Trent Horn, Catholic Answers Live.
Catch Catholic Answers Live anytime at Catholic.com.
Underwriting for Catholic Answers Live is provided by Real Estate for Life. Real Estate for Life connects home buyers and sellers to real estate agents while supporting pro-life organizations. On the web at realestateforlife.org.
Experience the incredible story of the woman who Time magazine named the most influential Catholic woman in the United States. Born Rita Rizzo, the future Mother Angelica grew up in a rough neighborhood in Canton, Ohio. Young Rita experienced abandonment, rejection, and heartache, but God touched her through a woman named Rhoda Wise. Encounter this amazing woman at the Mother Angelica Museum. Plan your visit today at motherangelicamuseum.com.
Are you a coffee drinker? If so, you can now enjoy a coffee roasted to perfection by the Carmelite monks of Wyoming. Delicious Mystic Monk coffee is roasted and prepared by monks in a hidden cloistered monastery and is available in over 25 varieties. All Mystic Monk coffees are works of perfection and labors of love. For more information on how to purchase Mystic Monk coffee, visit mysticmonkcoffee.com. That's mysticmonkcoffee.com.
The most original and exclusive Catholic content is on EWTN Radio.
I'm continually amazed and humbled at the way God can work through me to help so many people. Although I have no idea what the callers' questions will be that day, I trust that the Holy Spirit can use my education and experience to guide, challenge, or comfort those who call.
Mast Appeal with Colleen Kelly Mast. Saturday morning, 9 Eastern on EWTN Radio.
Welcome back to Catholic Answers Live. Trent Horns here, giving tips for defending the faith. If you'd like some tips for defending the faith, give us a call, 888-318-7884, 888-318-7884. In addition to all the work he has done as a writer, an apologist, and speaker in many ways, he's also a very fine debater. He's debated everyone from Gavin Ortland to James White to Doxo. It's an extraordinary career of debating.
There are things from my debate with Doxo I'm still broken from that. Things he broke in me, Sai, that still ain't healed. But it's one I don't talk about very much.
Now you look like Billy Joel doing a Sylvester Stallone imitation.
That's what like Sylvester Stallone. Do you like that, Sai? No, for those of you who are wondering, if you want to catch my quote-unquote debate with Ortho Doxo, go to my wife's channel, Too Far with Laura Horn. If you're a fan of the movie Rocky IV, or at least familiar with it, you should appreciate that. She did that video, but she just dropped another video this week, Sai, on how to prepare for the 3 Days of Darkness.
I gotta see that one. All right, Laura Horn killing it at Too Far with Laura Horn, which you can find on YouTube. Is that the only place you find it? Or
Too Far right now? For now, yeah. Too Far with Laura Horn's on YouTube.
Joseph in Kansas City, Missouri is next, listening to EWTN on Channel 130, Sirius XM Satellite Radio. Joseph, we're glad you're here. Go ahead with your question for Trent.
Hi, Trent. Yeah, I've got a situation that I'd appreciate just hearing your feedback and maybe some advice as to how to proceed. I'll give you just a little background on it. I was raised Catholic, went to Catholic schools my whole life until halfway through college. Became an evangelical for 35 years and recently reverted 4 years ago back to Catholicism. My wife, who was not raised Catholic, has also joined the church. While we were evangelicals, the church we belonged to at the time did not didn't necessarily baptize babies. We had our children dedicated when they were babies, but they were never baptized. We've got a son now who's fully grown that is living an immoral lifestyle. He went to evangelical Christian schools through high school, but he's completely agnostic now, immoral, and he has in his apartment he has a statue of Buddha that quite frankly bothers me when I'm around, although I'm very infrequently near the place. But and I've told him that it was an idol and that he needed to get rid of it, but he laughed me off. So for Mother's Day, my wife and her mother have been invited to his apartment, and now I'm invited for lunch. And I'm just wondering, what responsibility you think I might have there. I'm mature enough that the idol doesn't bother me at all necessarily, but my wife isn't as strong, and my mother-in-law is pretty. She's probably agnostic.
All right, let's let Trent take a shot at that. Trent, what your advice?
Yeah, Joseph, what I would say here is that, you shouldn't ever do something that you feel uncomfortable with. If your conscience tells you not to do something, you should listen to your conscience. But you should also take care not to be scrupulous about that. So you could feel like, oh, I'm worried about what am I going to do in this situation. But what I would say is that let me get my thoughts here. Actually, yes, I am still hearing an echo, and it's getting in my head. So here, let me finish my thoughts, and then I'll want to hear a response. An idol would be something that you worship because you believe it contains divinity within it in some way. It sounds like what you're saying is that your son is an agnostic, so he doesn't even really know if God exists or not. And the statue of Buddha sounds, in his case, it sounds more like a piece of artwork. Even for most Buddhists, they would say they don't worship the Buddha. It's just a title that means enlightened one that's given to Siddhartha Gautama, who is, they would say he is a man. He is someone who was enlightened, someone who refused to perform miracles, someone who just was kind of an enlightened person. So I would say that this would qualify as a kind of just religious artwork. It wouldn't be something that is an idol. So even if he were Buddhist, even if things were odd, the thing you'd be most concerned about would be scandal. If someone says, "Oh, you were at this house," does that mean it's okay to be a Buddhist? Nobody would take that from you visiting your son, that he is a Buddhist statue, that you as a Catholic think Buddhism is okay. They would think, no, he's visiting his son, and his son has his own beliefs, and that's all that they would take from it. So I would say that what it sounds like in this case is that it's not even an idol at all. It's a piece of artwork it's a religious artwork. It's from a false religion, but it's a kind of religious artwork. And I think you should go and spend time with him and engage him in dialogue to hopefully help him to come back to the faith more. And any overtures of goodwill can go a long way in those kinds of dialogues.
Joseph, thank you very, very much. Appreciate the call and the question. The number here is 888-318-7884. If you've got a question for Trent Horn, you are very welcome to call. 888-318-7884. That's what Trent does. He he started out defending the pro-life position and has become a full-fledged defender of the Catholic faith. He's a Catholic apologist, and your questions are welcome. 888-318-7884, 888-318-7884. Trent, what are you? You got anything coming up? Like any debates or talks or travels? Are you going anywhere? Is there places where people can come to see you do your thing?
Well, if you want to come and see me do my thing, I would recommend going to the Defending the Faith conference at the Franciscan University of Steubenville. I think it's the last weekend of July. I'm going to get the date up here right now. It's on Saturday, July 30th. So that weekend, July 29th through July 30th at the Franciscan University of Steubenville. If you want to come see me speak, because actually I'm not speaking as much lately. I've been wanting to spend some more time with my kiddos and focus on my podcasts and my writing. So lineup this year, we've got Scott Hahn, Pat Madrid, Ted Sri, myself. Lots of great people will be speaking there. Noel Mering, who wrote that wonderful book Against Wokeism. You can check all of that out. That's at SteubenvilleConferences.com. Just click on Defending the Faith. So that'll be July 28th through the 30th. So this summer. Yeah, so I think that's the biggest talk that I'll be giving this summer. If you missed that one, best place to go and see me would go to CatholicAnswersConference.com. I will, and I'm super excited, by the way, for the Catholic Answers Conference this year, because we're talking, the theme is I believe in God. So we're going to talk about atheism. I have been asking for a conference on atheism for like years and years and years. Just like, oh, can we get in on this? Can we do a conference on atheism? Because that's really where I cut my teeth in apologetics. I'm working on a new book on arguments related to atheism. Really, it's kind of two books, one higher level, one more of a popular level book. But there's going to be a lot of great people there. Frank Beckwith will be speaking. And you can double dose of Scott Hahn. You want Scott Hahn 2 times. You can get Scott Hahn Part 1, Defending the Faith at Steubenville, and then Scott Hahn Part 2 is in September. Catholic Answers Conference. I think it's the last weekend of September.
Yeah,
Pretty sure.
September 22nd.
Oh, it's not the last weekend. It is
last full weekend.
Last full weekend.
We always do the last full weekend. Yeah,
last full weekend. So it is September 21st to the 24th in beautiful San Diego, California. So that if you want two places where you can go to hear me speak, that'll be probably Defending the Faith in July at Steubenville, or Catholic Answers Conference, and that will be September 21st to the 24th. Two really awesome events to be at.
CatholicAnswersConference.com is where you can find out about that second one. Lacey's in Pennsylvania, listening on the Catholic Answers Live app. Lacey, thank you for downloading the app onto your phone. Go ahead with your question for Trent.
Hi, Trent. I'm a huge fan. I recently came across your books and everything else relatively recently, in like the past 2 months or so, and I'm discerning Catholicism now, so thank you for that. But on to my question. So I was watching YouTube, and some reel came up, and it was an atheist, a really prominent one, and he was essentially saying that the only reason that people would be Catholic or Christian is because of where they grew up. For example, growing up in the West, you're exposed to these ideals, whereas somebody in India would be Hindi because of where they grew up. And I just don't know, how do you rebuttal that? Like, what would be your response to somebody who says that what you grew up with is the reason why you are that religion, meaning it's just subjective truth?
Right. What I would point out is that this is a fallacy. It is an error in reasoning called the genetic fallacy. So the reasoning seems to go like this in the example that you gave, because you left out a subtle premise in their argument. The only reason you believe X is because you grew up in an environment that told you X is true. Therefore, X is false. I think that's what the atheist in that YouTube video is saying, because suppose you just granted their premise. You said, yeah, you're probably right. The reason that I believe in this is because that's how I was raised. So what? And then it just stops right there. That doesn't really advance any point that they're making. The real point they want to make is that either therefore what you believe is false, or therefore maybe it's not false, but you have no good reason to believe in it, because the only reason you have is just that other people told you that it's true. And I would say that once again, this is the fallacy. How you came to believe something doesn't tell you whether it's true or false. It also doesn't even tell you how much evidence there is for or against it. And I would say this kind of argument can be used to undermine any kind of belief, because you could turn it right back around to him, because he might say, look, you're Catholic because you grew up or Christian because you grew up in a Christian environment. If you had been born in India, you'd probably be Hindu. You could say to an atheist, look, the only reason you're an atheist is because you were born in an environment that's generally secular. If you were born in Europe 500 years ago, you almost certainly would not have been an atheist. But that doesn't prove atheism is true or false, or it doesn't show there's no good reasons for it. You can do this with all sorts of things. You could say the reason you believe the earth is flat is because you grew up in a flat earth environment. Or suppose there are some religions, certain Muslim sects that claim that defend child marriage, for example. There's a big debate online. I saw Inspiring Philosophy, a Christian apologist. He's been engaging Muslim apologists who defend child marriage recently. I don't think all Muslim apologists do that, but there seems to be enough to garner a response. And imagine someone said, well, you're only against and their argument is basically you're only against child marriage because you grew up in a culture that says child marriage is wrong. You could say, yeah, I grew up that way, and the reason my culture told me that is because there are good reasons to think this is wrong. So even if I grew up in a culture that says, oh, well, God exists and Christianity is true, well, there could be good reasons for that. The fact that I grew up in that culture doesn't prove whether the reasons exist or don't exist. So just tell them that this is the genetic fallacy. The fact that you came to believe something, how you come to believe something, does not tell you whether that's true or false, or whether there's good evidence or bad evidence for it. Where the source of the belief doesn't tell you whether it's true or false necessarily. You have to look at the specific evidence for or against it. That might be where I would start with the person and give them examples to show what you believe about the shape of the earth, about basic morality, about even their own atheism. That all would change based on where you were born, but that doesn't change the objective nature of those truths. The fact that you happen to be born in a culture that's right, it doesn't just because you might be born far away from the truth, it doesn't follow that there is no truth for you to discover. Sometimes you are very lucky and born close to the truth, and we should be grateful for that, not skeptical of it. Is that a helpful start?
Yes, that's very helpful. Thank you so much.
Yeah, no problem.
Do you have the book Answering Atheism, Lacey?
I don't.
Well, if you'd like it, hang on, and we will send you a copy of it, because we got a copy around here that would love to find its way to Pennsylvania. Just hang on and give your address to Edgar when he picks up the phone, and then we'll get it off to you. Trent Horn is our guest. It's Tips for Defending the Faith this hour. If you have questions for Trent, there is one line open right now, 888-318-7884. Next hour, Dr. Stacy Trasankos will be with us, and we'll talk about faith and science. You're welcome for that hour as well. Right back with more Trent after this. Want to get right to the core of Christ's saving message? Want a roadmap for living the life Christ calls you to? It's time to look again at the Beatitudes. In his new book, Heart of the Gospel, How the Beatitudes Show Us God's Plan for Happiness, Father Sebastian Walsh demonstrates compellingly how these 8 declarations make up the foundation, the essence, and the final goal of Jesus' teaching. Heart of the Gospel illuminates the scriptural passages from which we get the Beatitudes, explains the significance of their wording, their order, and their timing in Jesus' ministry. And it draws out edifying parallels and connections with salvation history and the lives of the saints. Most importantly, Father Walsh offers wise counsel from his own work as a priest and teacher to help you live the Beatitudes in your own life. Order your copy of Heart of the Gospel today at shop.catholic.com or ask for it at a good Catholic bookstore near you.
Want to know more about the origins of the Catholic Church? Joe Heschmeyer explores the beginnings of Christianity. In the early church was the Catholic Church. Joe digs deep into the words and actions of those who lived right after the apostles to refute anti-Catholic claims of how the faith was lived back then. Order your copy of The Early Church Was the Catholic Church today at shop.catholic.com or get it at a good Catholic bookstore near you.
If you're not a Bible scholar, the full message of how the Sunday Mass readings fit together can be tough to comprehend. Apologist Carlo Broussard is here to help. Join Carlo every Friday for the Sunday Catholic Word podcast. In each episode, he unpacks the scripture readings for that Sunday and brings them all together so you can better understand and defend the faith. Visit SundayCatholicWord.com to subscribe. That's SundayCatholicWord.com.
Tomorrow on More to Life, the life you were meant to live.
We'll look at how the theology of the body can help you live a more abundant life.
That's tomorrow on More to Life, 10 a.m. Eastern, 9 Central on EWTN Radio.
Now back to Catholic Answers Live.
Welcome back, Catholic Answers Live. Trent Horn, our guest. Over 350,000 copies in print, 6 years as the #1 book in its category on Amazon, more than 1,600 5-star reviews on Amazon, and not all by his family. I'm talking, of course, about Trent Horn's book, Why We're Catholic. It's the go-to resource when it comes to learning about the Catholic faith. And today only, till midnight, Honolulu time, when you buy 2 copies, we'll add a 3rd copy free to your cart. Here's how it works. Add 2 copies of Why We're Catholic to your cart. Enter the promo code B2G3. I think that stands for buy 2, get 3. Carrie comes up with the, Carrie. Add the promo code B2G. Oh, no, that could be a droid in the Star Wars universe as well. I'm not sure which thing it is. Is that a droid in the Star Wars universe? No? Oh, B2G3.
BRB? Is that the BRB droid? Oh,
BRB.
It's always gone.
Where is he? BRB.
Always gone.
And when you add that promo code, you get the 3rd one for free. Expires midnight Honolulu time. Go to shop.catholic.com and use that promo code B2G3. Going now to Brooks in Dallas, Texas, listening on the Guadalupe Radio Network. Brooks, go ahead with your question for Trent.
All right. Thank you for taking my call. I think one of the common problems a lot of our Protestant brothers and sisters have Catholicism is our devotion to Mary, and that's kind of a distraction from Christ in many ways. And my question would be, how would you respond to someone who, when you talk to them about, or the subject of Marian apparitions, for instance, comes up, and their response would be something to the effect of, well, Satan's a deceiver, and these apparitions are really the work of demons deceiving people, and that seems like a tough nut to crack for me. I just wonder what you might say to someone who thought that way.
Yeah, I think what I would say to them is that they sound a lot like the Pharisees when Jesus was performing his miracles to vindicate his divine mission to inaugurate the kingdom of God. You go to Matthew chapter 12, for example. Matthew 12, starting at verse 22, it says, "A blind and dumb demoniac was brought to him. He healed him so that the dumb man spoke and saw. The people were amazed. Can this be the son of David? And the Pharisees heard it. They said, it is only by Beelzebul, the prince of demons, that this man casts out demons. So they say, well, don't be impressed, folks. This guy only casts out demons because he's working for them. He's a double agent. It's a false flag operation, whatever you want to call it. And so Jesus wonderfully responded. I love what it says in Matthew 12:25. Knowing their thoughts, he said to them, because of course he's God, he knows the interior of the heart. Every kingdom divided against itself is laid waste, and no city or house divided against itself will stand. And if Satan casts out Satan, he is divided against himself. How then will his kingdom stand? So what he's saying here is, why would Satan be doing this? That, Satan is driving out his own demons, and he's encouraging people to rebuke him and to accept the true Messiah. He's undermining his own kingdom in supporting the kingdom of God. Why would the devil do this? It's for Jesus to vindicate what he's doing. And I think the same argument can apply to say, look, why would the devil do this? Now, I think in some cases, this argument, though, it's not completely without merit. Not every apparition is approved by the church, for example. Some of them could be connected to the occult, for example. The church has warned about some false apparitions, but here we have to look to the fruit. Is it an apparition that just encourages people to be faithful to the deposit of faith given in the Catholic Church, to encourage them to rebuke Satan, for example, in their baptismal promises, to cling to Christ's church? Then it would seem odd that Satan would use some kind of miraculous counterfeit Marian apparition to encourage people to be faithful to Catholics. But if it's an apparition that tells people you should go and read this occult book, for example, now we see immediately the connection here. So I think when you're engaging Protestants who believe that the church is diabolical, and I don't think there's many, at least the majority are not like that, but if they believe the Catholic Church is diabolical, that it is leading people to hell, if they truly believe that, then the real debate you have to have there is what teaching of the church is false that makes you think that, and then talking about those particular teachings. But if you're engaging someone who's Protestant who says, well, I think the Catholic Church is just another denomination like Presbyterianism or Methodism. I don't believe it, but it's just another Christian denomination. It's not that big a deal. And yet, unlike these other denominations, you have miraculous appearances of the Blessed Virgin Mary. These are the Eucharistic miracles. It would seem like God is trying to show through these signs and wonders one of these churches possesses the fullness of faith that the others don't have. I think then the apparitions and the miracles can be much more something that can push a Protestant towards the church who is or more open to its message, who's more indifferent towards Catholicism. Because if you think it's diabolical, then you might be more willing to accept the diabolical answer. Well, yeah, Satan wants to deceive people, so they join the church that will send you to hell. Okay, let's talk about the doctrines. What makes you think these doctrines are false? You're using probably a false metric to judge them, like sola scriptura, for example. So there, I think when it comes up, you either have a choice of engaging the doctrines themselves to show that Catholicism is not like a demonic apparition that directly leads to the occult or something. There's nothing unbiblical in Catholicism. Or if the person's more indifferent, to press them to show, hey, why do you think God is doing these distinctly Catholic miracles if Catholicism is just another denomination? Maybe it's more than that. So that might be the two different ways I would go about it with a person. Is that helpful, or would you like any follow up on that?
Yeah, that is helpful. Thank you. I like particularly that first part about the Satan divided, his kingdom divided against itself. I think that appeal to Scripture would probably resonate to some degree with people who might think that way. So thank you very much.
Yeah, I agree. So I think going down that road, but also pointing out, because I have given this some thought, because I don't accept every apparition claim. I don't accept every claim to private revelation. It is possible some of them may be counterfeit. That's why we have the magisterium to weigh these matters for us. But I do think that the argument, it's demonic, I might ask them, well, why do you think these Marian apparitions are demonic? Like some apparitions, I might say, that's demonic because the alleged Mary in the apparition is directly telling people to do sinful or occult things. But if a Protestant says, all Marian apparitions are demonic, well, then the reason they're saying that is they've already assumed what they're trying to prove. They've already assumed the Catholic Church is false, and so no amount of miraculous evidence will convince them otherwise. And so then you have to challenge that assumption that Catholicism, for them, really is not that it's false, but that it's demonic, or that it's a religion, a counterfeit religion that is trying to lead people to hell. You'd have to confront that assumption. But if the person's just indifferent, then you can ask, well, why aren't you giving these signs and wonders more credence then, instead of just having indifference? But thank you for calling in.
Thanks, Brooks. Excuse me. I'm going to keep moving because a lot of folks still want to talk with Trent. We'll go to Caleb in Alabama watching on YouTube. Caleb, welcome. Go ahead with your question for Trent.
Hi, thank you so much for taking my call. Trent, I'm actually in the process of converting to Catholicism. Your YouTube content has actually been super helpful, so thank you for that.
Praise be to God.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much. And today I actually watched that prominent YouTuber Gavin Ortland's video. I know you've debated him. He seems like a really nice guy. He made the point, he set up things kind of like the first 1,500 years of the church as the first 500 years being the patristic era and the next 1,000 years being sort of the medieval era. And of course, he said that was very rough, but he set it up as sort of like the early church fathers would have disagreed vehemently with what the church became by, say, 1500. It's an argument that I could see my own family sort of making. I haven't had to have that debate yet, but I know that those days are coming for me. Is there certain things that you could point to that, somebody who's not an expert like myself could look into to sort of counter that argument?
Yes, I am hearing this more, and there are Protestants who have put forward an argument like this for quite some time. I critique some of these arguments in my book, The Case for Catholicism. There was a book written several years ago by William Webster called The Church of Rome at the Bar of History. And I actually have two to three more books slated ahead of me in the next few years. One of them is a more in-depth work on atheism that might ultimately replace Answering Atheism. So I'm excited about that. But after that, I want to write a very comprehensive book on Protestantism, and in particular about the Church Fathers. Because you have people like Webster, but now you have people like Gavin Ortland, Matthew Barrett. You have other evangelicals who are looking at the scholastics and the patristics and saying, no, they actually support the Reformation and classical Protestantism more than what Catholicism has become. And I think a lot of that involves either misreading the fathers or placing an undue burden on them to show, they believed in a particular doctrine, but that doctrine is going to develop over time into something that they might need explained to them. So Gavin has given the example of in the Scripture, like the Trinity, like is the Trinity in the Old Testament? And Gavin has said, well, did Old Testament Jews believe in the Trinity? Well, no. But if you were to explain it to them and show them signs, clues from what they had been revealed, they would say, oh, okay, after you've explained it all to me, that makes sense. And so someone like Gavin might say, look, the early church fathers, they wouldn't have agreed with indulgences. And I agree that in the first and second centuries, in the early patristic age, you didn't have an indulgence, but the principle behind an indulgence is that it's the remission of the temporal punishment for sins. So if you explain to the church fathers, look, the church has the authority to grant penances, right? And in the early church, confession was done publicly. So you publicly confess your sins, and the penances could be quite severe. You could be prohibited from receiving communion for, years because of a sin that you had committed. And the early church fathers knew, well, the church had the ability, because Christ told the apostles, what you bind on earth is bound in heaven, what you loose on earth is loosed in heaven, to say, look, if the church has the ability to bind and loose temporal punishment for sin on earth, wouldn't that authority also affect in some way to those who are on their way to heaven, who are after this life, who are being purified of their sins? Though it might be a little bit different how the church prays and petitions to God on behalf of those souls who are being purified. But if you can, strengthen and relax penances, excommunicate people on earth, does the church's authority stop at death? So I would say here that with indulgences, similar to how Gavin might say, oh, well, you would explain the Trinity to the Jews in the Torah, in the in the early Israelite period. They might say, oh yeah, that makes more sense. I need more explanation, but I see what you're saying here. I think that'd be similar, instead of just saying, oh, well, the early church fathers would have been, not had a clue what you're talking about with indulgences, because our understanding of the faith develops over time, even though we receive one deposit of faith. So there's lots of different things that can come up there, but I think just a few points you'll want to remember to wrap it up here is that we don't expect the church fathers to have a worldview and theology that matches the catechism today. Doctrine develops. But I would say, look, is the trajectory they're on, does it make more sense of it moving towards the Catholic position or the Protestant position? Like for some of these things, and I think Gavin believes in this doctrine, that'd be eternal security, the view that you cannot lose your salvation, and which is common among many evangelical Protestants, that you, no matter what, once you're saved, you can never be unsaved, never lose your salvation. I would say that was something that was basically unknown in the church until the time of Calvin. And I've cited that repeatedly in different sources. The church fathers would have had no idea what you're talking about. You read Augustine, you read what they say about salvation. They would have had no idea what you're talking about. And yet many Protestants will say, well, that doesn't matter because I think it's in the Bible. So it's kind of a double standard argument in that respect. But if you want more resources on this, especially about the fathers, it'll be a few years until my book comes out comprehensively on that subject. I would like to send you 2 books, because I can. Now that I said it, work can't go back on me on it. I'd like to send you The Fathers Know Best by my friend Jimmy Akin, and The Early Church Was the Catholic Church by my friend Joseph Heschmeyer. 2 super good books, Fathers Know Best and The Early Church Was the Catholic Church. Real quick, Caleb, is that at least a good start for you?
Oh, absolutely. Thank you so much. And yeah, your answer was very helpful. It makes sense to kind of bring things back down to concepts that developed over time. So
exactly, yeah. And to say, look, with Protestantism, would that not so much, hey, was the early church exactly identical to Catholicism, but on the trajectory it's moving, what makes more sense? The Protestantism we have today, or especially evangelicalism or the low church kind of Protestantism that Gavin endorses, versus Catholicism. So yeah, check those out. And then I really do hope in probably about 2 or 3 years, I want to wait until Matthew Barrett's new book is coming out in June. Gavin will have a book out on this subject in a year, I think. Eventually then I want to reply to all of the books that are out on these subjects. It is important as we address the fathers. More Protestants are trying to marshal the fathers to their case. And that was something actually the magisterial reformers like Calvin and others attempted to do as well. So as Catholics, we need to be ready to hear these replies and respond accordingly.
Caleb, thank you. We got to take a break. We'll be right back with more tips for defending the faith with Trent Horn on Catholic Answers Live.
This is Archbishop Paul Coakley of the Archdiocese of Oklahoma City, and you're listening to Catholic Answers Live.
Do you love praying for people? Have you ever wanted to use your gift of prayer to share Jesus with others and build up the body of Christ? Start a public prayer station with St. Paul Street Evangelization. Listen to people's needs, pray with them, or invite them to meet you at church. St. Paul Street Evangelization can help you get started. Find out how at streetevangelization.com. That's streetevangelization.com.
EWTN, communicating the faith.
I've only been Catholic for a little over a year. I converted from Baptist. My wife and mother-in-law did too. Listen to you guys every day. I'm really enjoying it.
I always enjoy listening to you. Your folks are great. I hope you go for many more years. You guys have such a wonderful program. I've been a part of EWTN for years now, and I love to listen to it every day.
Welcome back to Catholic Answers Live. Trent Horn, our guest. Let's remind you one more time before we go right back to the phones that we've got the 3 for the price of 2. Buy 2, get the third one free deal on Trent's book only today up until midnight Honolulu time. The way you get the book, Why We're Catholic, 3 copies for the price of 2, you go to shop.catholic.com. You use the promo code B2G3. You sunk my battleship. Sorry, I couldn't help it. Use the promo code B2G3 and when you check out at shop.catholic.com and get a third book added to your order of 2. Let's go to our friend Luke in Seoul, South Korea, watching on YouTube. Luke, always nice to hear from you. Welcome back. Go ahead with your question for Trent.
Hello, Trent. Good morning from me.
Howdy.
It's good morning for him. Yeah. In Seoul. What's
okay.
Wait a second. What's it about 9 in the morning in Seoul?
No, this is 7:47, almost 8 p.m.
Oh, almost 8. Oh, yeah. Oh, I missed it by... It's halfway around the world. I missed it by an hour. I feel like I get credit for that one. I'm going to give myself credit for that. Go ahead, Luke.
All right, Trent, thank you for your work. I've not read any of your books, but I watch a lot of your conferences on YouTube, and I must say they are wonderful. So my question is this. How do you reply a non-Catholic who says that the infant baptism is unbiblical, and also the form of administration, which is sprinkling? He says you have to be dipping, and that is how it is in the scripture.
Oh, so you can only baptize adults and you got to immerse them.
Yeah, so let me...
You have to immerse them, yeah.
Okay, Trent?
Well, first, you can immerse infants. My children were baptized... Well, my third child was baptized in a Byzantine Catholic church, actually, that we were attending for a while. We had been attending it in San Diego. And he was immersed. And so in the East, you just dunk the kid in. So you actually can immerse children, though a lot of other priests don't have the gumption to want to do that. And I understand. I think I saw a video once of a priest, a baby being baptized, immersion, and he's like a slippery watermelon and just kind of falls right out of the guy's hands. But so you can do that. You can fully immerse them. But most times you pour water over the child's head. And some people claim, oh, well, you can only... you have to immerse someone for it to be a valid baptism. And that's not the case. You go all the way back to the early church. You go to the Didache, for example, and it gives instructions in the first century for baptism. And it shows that even then in the first century, Christians practiced multiple baptism disciplines. So it says if you have living water, like a river, or use that. Otherwise, use other water. If you cannot in cold and warm, and if you don't have either, if you don't have enough to immerse someone, it says you can pour out water thrice upon the head in the name of the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. So the formula has always been the same. You have to give a Trinitarian baptism. But whether it's immersion or not, while immersion is the fullest sense of baptism, as the Catechism would say, the other forms are valid because God wants everyone to be baptized. So he wants Inuits who live in Alaska who live in the Arctic Circle to be baptized, even if they can't fully immerse themselves in polar water. He wants people in the deserts who might not, have a well and there is no pool of water for you, or if you're in prison, because you need water to live. If anyone is living for at least some time, usually there's some kind of water nearby, at least a bit for them to be sprinkled with, to make it valid. So I think I would respond in that way, that the Bible never says it has to be full immersion. That's an assumption that people make. And if they want more on that subject, we have a lot more about baptism and the means of baptism at our website at Catholic.com. But thank you so much for calling in.
Thank you. And on we go, Luke, because there are still folks that would like to get on with Trent if we can. And up next is Elizabeth in Arlington, Virginia. I can't get line 6. Could you put it on for me? Elizabeth, thanks for your call. Go ahead with your question for Trent.
Yes, I have joined a Catholic book club, and we are studying centering prayer. And sort of the prize in the middle of all this is the teaching of Father Thomas Keating, a Trappist monk. And I am very hung up on the notion that we can become God. And I've taken, my studies to our parish priest who sanctioned this book club. And he came up with St. Athanasius from the catechism and said, well, he said we become gods. And I looked up so that we might become God means and what St. Athanasius actually meant by that. And I would really like your take on who's who's wrong.
This is a very important question. I'm glad you called. Trent?
Yes, that's true, because some people misquote St. Athanasius to try to make it seem like that we become God in the sense of being divine beings or divine persons, and that's not true. There is only one God, so we believe in monotheism. There is one God who is the infinite act of being itself. However, God is able, God has his different attributes, the things that make God God. Now, some of these things are unique to God. He can't share them with anyone else. So like God is all-knowing, nobody else is all-knowing, only God is all-knowing. But God is just, God is kind and loving, and he can make us just and kind and loving. He can share those attributes with us. Those would be called communicable attributes. He can communicate or give them to us. So we could become just like God. We could become wise like God even. But we can't become all-knowing, all-powerful, eternal like God. Well, we have unending life, but we don't have eternal life like God because God is outside of time. So in Scripture, we look at 2 Peter 1:4, for example. And there, Peter says, he talks about escaping from the corruption that is in the world because of passion, and from that, becoming partakers of the divine nature. So in theology in the West, we call this divinization, and in the East, it would be called theosis, that God wants to make us God-like, godly. He wants us to become more like him, but we don't become gods ourselves. Now, what happens here is that a lot of people will quote when they quote St. Athanasius, they're usually quoting the Catechism. So they're quoting Catechism paragraph 460. The Word became flesh to make us partakers of the divine nature. So the Catechism is quoting 2 Peter 1:4, what I just read to you. And then it quotes St. Athanasius later on, for the Son of God became man so that we might become God. That itself is a bit of a mistranslation. We got two mistranslations here. In the English Catechism, the Latin of the original Catechism, it's so that we might become God. We might be made gods, lowercase Latin letters, like lowercase g gods. So what the heck does that mean? Well, in St. Athanasius, in the original Greek that he wrote, a better translation would be so that we might be deified. He uses the Greek word theopoiathomen. Theopoiathomen. So theos in Greek is God. Poieo is to make or to do. So what he's saying here is we're being deified. We're being made to be like God and the attributes he can share with us. You might say so that we might be made godly. Might be a better term. The Son of God became man so that man might be made godly. Would probably be a better way to get the point across. If you stay on the line, we'll send you an article by my friend Tim Staples that covers this in more detail. If you want more about this, definitely check out Tim's article, Are We Gods, on Catholic.com. But yeah, stay on the line and we'll send that to you.
Elizabeth, thanks so much. Sorry for those we didn't get to. Coming up next, we'll talk about faith and science with Dr. Stacy Trasenko, scientist and theologian. Trent Horn, thanks. I always enjoy the hour. Thanks for doing this with us. I don't think Trent can hear me.
I am here. Thank you for having me. I'm just sending the name of the article.
So you were sending.
So Elizabeth will have it.
Oh, because I was going to say a bunch of bad stuff about you since you couldn't hear me. And
No, I was
but
just
I won't
helping
do it.
someone come to know God. That's all.
Oh, good for you, Trent. All right, hang on. We'll be right back with Dr. Stacy Trasenko's Faith and Science right after this on Catholic Answers Live. Welcome back to Catholic Answers Live. I am Cy Kellett, your host. Our number 888-318-7884. And when you talk about faith and science, when we do a program on faith and science, we get lots and lots of calls, and your calls are welcome. Whether you are a believer or an unbeliever, whether the science seems clear to you or the science seems foggy to you, whatever your place is, in the world of both faith and science, you're welcome to call with a question. You certainly do not have to be a Catholic to call, 888-318-7884. But if we're going to talk about faith and science, we need an expert on faith and science. So Dr. Stacy Trasancos, scientist and theologian, is our guest this hour. She wrote a wonderful book. Well, she's written several wonderful books, but I always recommend Particles of Faith, which is about being a chemist and coming to Jesus. Dr. Stacy Trasancos, thanks for being here with us.
Thank you, Cy. It's always good to be here. I enjoy talking with you.
Yeah, me too. Me too. I love it when you're here, and I really do hope people will call with it. And the one thing I love about it too is there's no question that's too hard. You don't have to worry about stumping Stacy, or if you're one of those people who wants to stump our guest, go ahead and give it a try, because she's a good-natured, well-educated scientist and theologian. And you are welcome to call 888-318-7884, 888-318-7884. If I asked you, Stacy, to give a talk on, say, angels and electromagnetism, could you do that?
Yeah.
You could?
That's yeah. It's all fascinating. Like, it's the totality of everything. God, angels, electromagnetic radiation, us. Like, it's amazing.
It is, but now I saw the title of your talk at Notre Dame, and was it Seton Hall? Seton Hall, and it was something along the lines of angels and electromagnetism or something, and like life among the invisibles. Exactly,
my life among the invisible. When you're thinking about God and angels, you're aware of the spiritual realm. But when I became Catholic, it was already a familiar way of thinking to me to kind of have like your head in the clouds all the time, thinking about the atomic realm, because that's invisible too. And so I just added God and angels into my lexicon, and life is very full. But I sometimes have to remind myself of the physical world.
What do you mean you have to remind yourself of the physical? Because you live in this world that these worlds really that you've learned of invisible things, and you need to remember to have contact with the things that are actually visible and tactile.
To get outside of my head and to think about the things in real life that need to get done. I mean, it's a nerdiness, I guess you could call it, but it's fascinating. I mean, when I was a scientist, there would be so much going on that you have to think about. Here, I'm not saying I'm brilliant or anything, just like you have to think about things in a very abstract way in models in your mind. You have to move things around in your mind and figure out problems with things you can't actually go see and touch. Unless you're going to do an experiment, but that can take forever. So you kind of have to remember to wake up out of that and like go drive your car somewhere.
888-318-7884, the number, 888-318-7884. Your faith and science questions are welcome. It does strike me that for a Catholic person who has things like the Eucharist in our life, where the appearance and reality are not the same thing, modern science is actually kind of a good school for that, in that now we're like, kids are fascinated when they learn about molecules and atoms or cells, because all of that stuff says, well, this desk is actually not what it appears to be. There's like the one thing we always learn, I don't know, 6th grade or something. It's actually more open space than solid. It's all, like, whereas when you're a kid, you're like, what? But that kind of, it's almost like science has developed a sacramental view of the world.
Oh, I like that. I never heard it put like that before. But yeah, that's pretty cool. I have to remember that. Thanks to Cy Kellett. I mean, like the table being atoms, it's not that we contradict what we sense. Like if you feel a hard table, you really are feeling, you can trust your senses. You're touching a hard table. But the reason that it's hard is because of the forces among the atoms in the molecules that make up the wood of the table. They're interacting with the sensory receptors on your skin, so that there's just a lot more explanation to the feeling that you're having. And it's not to negate the feeling, it's just to say that we know so much more about why it is that we see things, that we hear things, that our hearts beat.
Yeah.
And when you open that up to children, they do love it. I find that my students love it a whole lot more when you tell them, this is God's handiwork. You're studying how God made things. And then they're like, even if they're not scientists, they're very excited about it. You've heard me say that a million times.
Yeah. But I never get tired of it.
It's true.
Yeah, because that's the thing that's
so true.
I have to say, I've sometimes thought about as a child when science, when I learned science, if someone had said it that way, I think I might have had been more invested in it. It would have seemed less like something you're preparing for the test and more like something where you're learning something important.
Yes. That's kids, whether they're little kids, high school kids, in college, young adults, they want things to fit together and make sense. And so you need to tell them that. You need to say the stuff you're learning about atoms. It's actually, this is happening in your body right now. Your body is made up of atoms. This is what's holding you together right now. This is how God is holding you in existence right now. It's part of the story. And whatever you learn in this scientific realm, you're just studying God's handiwork. And that's kind of what I talked about in that talk, electromagnetic radiation. That's light. That's light. And everything we see comes from electrons jumping around inside of atoms. And you don't really think about that unless you're taught to think about that. But when you do know, well, my hope is that when people hear me talk about it and they leave my talk, their life has changed. They look at the world differently.
Yeah, exactly. Right. And I think that's why people love coming to those talks, because the perspective that you have from both faith and science is one in which you do get a fuller view of a view that is, and that that view gives you a greater confidence. You don't just live in this random, weird world of random things.
No, I always say if the ancient Hebrew people could find their faithfulness in God because the sun and moon showed up every day, like there was regularity in nature, how much more can we find faithfulness in God because we know that the electron jiggles 9,192,631,770 times in the cesium-133 atom every second. Yeah. That's how we define the atomic clock. Like, we ought to be like, thank you, God. I mean, God, that is, I've said it before too, that's my answer to suffering. When I feel like I don't want to turn things over to God, I'm like, if God can do that, he's got this. We're going to be okay. Things are going to be fine.
That's a wonderful view. Fine. Yeah. And I mean, I guess we've all probably memorized the wiggle of the cesium atom. I mean, all of you guys in there, right? You know how many times the electron on the cesium atom?
It's a great dinner trick.
Yeah, but don't bring cesium to dinner. 888-318-7884 is the number. 888-318-7884. Our old friend Steve in Nipomo, California, watching on YouTube. You are up first today, Steve. Go ahead with your question for our good friend, Dr. Stacy Trasancos.
Thank you, Cy. Ask Edgar about the joke. I told him earlier. Anyways, Stacy, needs your help about the 3-person baby. Are you aware of that? That just came out recently.
Yeah, it's in my email. Yes, I'm looking at it right now.
In Great Britain, I think they took genetic material from 3 different parents and made one little baby. Mm-hmm. Is that what you're talking about, Steve?
Yeah, they do the maternal spindle transfer or a pronuclear transfer.
So you want to know from a scientific or a moral point?
What the position of the church is on this?
Yeah, okay, Stacy. What would the church have to say about this?
Well, I mean, fundamentally, it gets back to the dignity and sanctity of life, that children have a right to be born of a mother and a father in the marital embrace. And so the dignity and sanctity of the human life, It gets back to also the unity and procreative aspect of marriage. So it's like an IVF thing. You don't want to take break that unity of marriage and put it in a lab. You don't want to break that unity of marriage with contraception or any of that. So it breaks some very fundamental, primal things that are part of our human dignity. It messes that up in the name of science. It takes the conjugal act away from the mother and father and puts it in the lab. It creates a human that may, if this were to continue, may or may not even know who the biological mother and father are. And then you bring in this genetic changing, you are going to change things. Maybe even, I don't remember if this changes I think it does. You're going to change things in the germline that you don't know what consequences that's going to have in successive generations. So I know it's not just Catholics that are raising the ethical flag on this kind of thing. And it's like so many of these things, it happens in little tiny steps. So the one little, it's a big breakthrough, but then people say, well, it's not that big a deal ethically. We haven't really gone. We're not cloning humans in the lab yet. We're not actually making 3 parents to make a baby. This was just one experiment that had these results. Yeah, but they don't ever stop. They don't stop trying to go further. They're not going to stop trying till they can clone humans in the lab, is what I think.
Steve, I know you're not Catholic, Steve, but does that match with your moral intuition about the thing?
Very much so. You're right. It's in vitro, on and on. I just was wondering if the Catholic stance was different than what I thought. You nailed it. You guys, I agree with 100% what you're saying.
Thank you very much, Steve. I appreciate it. I think there are some people, Stacy, who in art, they'll do this. A comedian will do it as a comic. A scientist will do it in science. Is that this is an important thing that I'm doing, and you can't just apply moral standards to it. It's kind of beyond your moral standards, because science has to progress, or for my art I have to do it. This just seems to be the spirit of our age, that there's almost a scientist, you'd be interfering with his or her self-expression as a scientist if you said, stop cloning babies like this.
Yes, and the problem is that people don't care to know about the history of these issues. And so, what they say about history, it repeats itself, or it rhymes with itself. People don't care. People don't stop to think about that. And, I really do believe it's up to the people of virtue, of faith, who are looking at the bigger picture, to keep saying, you got to watch out for this. You got to watch out for this. There's so many bioethical issues. Contraception. The church was saying a long time ago, this isn't a good idea. Things are not going to happen well. And some people listen and some people don't, but we still have to keep saying it. And I firmly believe, because I've studied the history of science with Father Stanley Yockey, I firmly believe that we are still living in the scientific revolution. Science is, not to be dramatic, but science is exploding in our time. I mean, just look at your cell phone, how much it changes over the years. We're learning to do things at such a fast rate that now more than ever, Catholics need to know about virtue. They need to be out there speaking up about why to seek the good. We can't go to evil means. We can't break things that are good, or we're going to regret it. It's kind of like when you have a high school kid that says, I'm going to drop out of school, and you're trying to tell them this isn't a good idea. You're going to regret it. Sometimes you can't convince them that you're right, but you have confidence that you are, and so you just kind of like see it through. You keep walking it through.
Right. Keep trying to communicate it despite the resistance to hearing it. We got to take a quick break. Dr. Stacy Trasenko, scientist and theologian, is our guest. We're talking about faith and science. If you have a question about faith and science, whatever your own position on faith or science is, you are welcome here today. 888-318-7884.
Miss a show? Make sure to catch up by downloading the podcast, available online at Catholic.com.
Underwriting for Catholic Answers Live is provided by Real Estate for Life. Real Estate for Life connects homebuyers and sellers to real estate agents while supporting pro-life organizations. On the web at realestateforlife.org.
This is Conversations with Consequences, where we delve deeper into issues affecting our church, our country, and our core, the family.
As Catholics, we need to be informed, aware, and able to talk through some of the tough topics that we're facing in our culture and in our world. Conversations with Consequences gives us the tools to do so.
It's not enough to pray. We have to be a light for the world.
Conversations with Consequences, tomorrow at 5 p.m. Eastern on EWTN Radio.
Welcome back. Catholic Answers Live. Dr. Stacy Trasenko is our guest. She's a chemist. She worked for, I don't remember, I think it was DuPont. Was it DuPont?
Yes.
DuPont, trying to figure out how trees make energy or get, photosynthesis. Guess what? She didn't, because it's really complicated. But I'm sure she advanced the science in some impressive way, but still trying to figure that one out. But a chemist and theologian. And now studying philosophy as well, I think. Are you a scientist, theologian, and philosopher? One thing I was wondering about, and if this is too personal, you don't have to answer it, but as a chemist, are you better at getting stains out than other people? Like, I feel like I would be better at it if I had a PhD in chemistry.
Yeah. Like dissolves like. So just, you got to know whether things are polar or non-polar and the nature of the stain. And you also don't want to dissolve the fabric. So you kind of have to balance all that stuff out.
How do you know I don't want to dissolve the fabric? Maybe that's my fashion.
It could happen.
Jason in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, listening to EWTN on Channel 130, Sirius XM satellite radio. You are next, Jason. We're very grateful for the call. Go ahead with your question for Dr. Stacy Trasenkos.
Hey, Dr. Stacy. So I have a question in regards to evolution. The question is that, a lot of people, more atheists and even some Christians, say that the evolution of one species to another. However, scientifically, we haven't found any transitional fossils where, for example, like a wolf is turning into a monkey's turning into a human or whatnot. How is that explained?
Okay. Cut me off if I go too long. Transitional fossils. Yeah. Transitional fossils they're like the missing links, the thing that come in between, you want to, you got the monkey and then you see a transition and then you've got the next species. The thing is, the way evolution works, in a sense, everything is a transitional fossil. I mean, it depends on how you define that word. And we have to remember that in the fossil record, it's like you're putting together a puzzle. When the anthropologists find a fossil, they have to date it and they have to figure out where it belongs in the body and what that body was and where it fits in with the diversity of life. They have to classify it and categorize it. There are so many missing pieces that, there could be transitional fossils. We just haven't found them. There could be, like what you're talking about, transitional fossil. But everything, if the diversity of life is a continuum, and by continuum, I mean down to the individual level. What I mean by that is when a mother and a father with their genetics come together and make a baby, the baby is not a clone of the father. The baby is not a clone of the mother. The baby has the genetics of the same species because it's born of that mother and father, but it has unique genes of its own that's a combination of those. And if they have a second child, that second child isn't going to be exactly the same. Even if they have identical twins, they're going to grow up and their genes are going to express slightly differently depending on their environments and their experiences. So it's all a transition. In the fossil record, they haven't found everything. And I think they have found what scientists would call transitional fossils. Now, the people who say there aren't any transitional fossils would probably disagree and say, no, that's not what we mean by a transitional fossil. So you kind of have to be really clear about what you're saying in the definition. the church teaches this. If you are okay with the science of evolution, the theory of evolution, what we're really doing, and I was just saying to Cy that we live in this explosion of science. We're living at a time when so much new scientific knowledge is being gained. My approach to evolution is I just sit back, because I'm not an evolutionary biologist. I just read what they find and I listen to what the experts are saying, and I just take it all in, knowing that theories change over time as more data becomes available. If you remember what I said, science is the study of the handiwork of God. I'm not looking at evolution thinking it's going to prove or disprove God's existence any more than my son would look at a plate of spaghetti on the table and wonder if it proves or disproves mom's existence. God created the world like a mother makes a dinner. God created the world. And when we study science, we're learning more about how he created it. And with evolution, we kind of have to say, the whole genetic idea of evolution makes sense, that genes get passed on to generations and that species would diverge and that new traits would appear depending on natural selection in the environment. That all makes sense. We don't have the full answer. And if the real question is, well, then how did humans emerge? Don't forget, God created this world. God could have worked a miracle for the first human with the rational soul, body and soul united, composite. We have a spiritual soul, which other animals don't have. So I don't find anything in evolution that, I don't know why people argue about it, to be honest. I don't see what the big controversy is about.
Jason, what do you think?
Yeah, like my thing was like Noah's Ark, all the animals, when the Bible talks about them, it's more like the family or the genus of the animal, and they kind of interbred and created different species and newer species of the same family or whatnot. But you
found it helpful though what Dr. Stacy said.
Yeah, she's awesome.
Well, I think so too. Jason, and that's awful nice of you to say it. I'll tell you what.
Thank you.
Let's send Jason a book, and he'll have to tell Edgar which Catholic Answers book he'd like. But any friend of Dr. Stacy's is a friend of ours. Andrew in Michigan is next, listening on 990 AM. Andrew, go ahead with your question for Dr. Stacy Trasancos.
Hi, yeah, I had a question that is, if God is the concept of infinity, is he like an ever-expanding infinity, always becoming more? Or is he like the set of all sets infinity? And depending on which is which, how does that impact our finite existences?
It was a little choppy, but you got all that?
Yeah, say it one more time. Let's see.
Really? You want to
if God is infinity,
is he like an ever-expanding infinity, always becoming more? Or is he like the set of all sets infinity? And depending on which, how does that impact our finite existences?
Okay, you might have stumped me there. So the way... So the way we talk about God, so this is not science, this is getting more into theology or philosophy, but the way we talk about God, I take it from the beginning of the Summa Theologia, where St. Thomas Aquinas is saying, how do we know God exists? And so I'm getting to your question, but how we know God exists, he's that thing than which nothing greater can exist. God is simple, meaning there's no parts to God. God is infinite. God is all powerful, all knowledgeable, but also we can't fully express God. So we can know that God exists through reason, and then we can know something about God, like that the Holy Trinity and the Incarnation, through divine revelation, because God had to tell us that. We couldn't have figured out the Trinity just through reason alone. But then, but we can't say exactly what God is. So I don't know if it's even a question that we can ask or answer to wonder if God is always expanding, because then that presumes some shape. God is being itself. You don't even, my priest said in seminary, one of his professors wrote on the board, "Does God exist?" And my priest said that they were all stumped as seminarians, like, yeah, well, we're here in seminary. Of course we think God exists. But the priest wrote the Latin for God is existence. What he was trying to teach them is that it's not even really the right question to say, does God exist? God is existence. And so I don't know if there's that's the best I can do on answering your question about, is God ever expanding? When you say that, I'm thinking about the steady state universe, or the universe expanding now, the way we think of the universe, but we don't think of God that way. He's outside of time and space.
Got to take a quick break, Andrew. We'll be right back, and you can finish, Dr. Stacy.
Okay.
Are you ready to defend your faith in a world of unbelief? Join us at the 9th Annual Catholic Answers Apologetics Conference. This year's theme, I Believe in God, and it'll help you provide clear and charitable answers to atheism, agnosticism, and plain old indifference. Don't miss what promises to be the event of the season. Join us in San Diego from September 21st through 24th as we welcome our special guest, Dr. Scott Hahn, and an all-star lineup of great Catholic speakers. Spend quality time with your favorite Catholic Answers apologists and enjoy 4 days of fun, fellowship, and adoration of the Almighty. Seats are still available, but they're going fast. Visit CatholicAnswersConference.com or call 888-291-8000 to register. Enter promo code EARLY and save $50. That's CatholicAnswersConference.com.
Want to know more about the origins of the Catholic Church? Joe Heschmeyer explores the beginnings of Christianity. In the early church was the Catholic Church. Joe digs deep into the words and actions of those who lived right after the apostles to refute anti-Catholic claims of how the faith was lived back then. Order your copy of The Early Church Was the Catholic Church today at shop.catholic.com or get it at a good Catholic bookstore near you.
If you're not a Bible scholar, the full message of how the Sunday Mass readings fit together can be tough to comprehend. Apologist Carlo Broussard is here to help. Join Carlo every Friday for the Sunday Catholic Word podcast. In each episode, he unpacks the scripture readings for that Sunday and brings them all together so you can better understand and defend the faith. Visit SundayCatholicWord.com to subscribe. That's SundayCatholicWord.com.
Tomorrow on More to Life, the life you were meant to live.
We'll look at how the theology of the body can help you live a more abundant life.
That's tomorrow on More to Life, 10 a.m. Eastern, 9 Central on EWTN Radio.
Now back to Catholic Answers Live.
Welcome back to Catholic Answers Live. I am Cy Kellett, your host, and our guest is Dr. Stacy Trasenko, scientist and theologian, the author of the book Particles of Faith and many other things. Also a very popular speaker all around the world. All around the world, they get to hear Dr. Stacy Trasenko's. On the line, we have Andrew in Michigan who wanted to ask a kind of a quantifying question about God, like what kind of an infinity is God? And Stacy, you were referring to Aquinas in saying that we can't say what God is. That's not a human capability to say what God is.
Right. We can't say what God. We can know that God exists. We can know God through analogy, so we can make analogies. God is like this. God is like that. We can know what God is not. We can say God is not falsity. God is not contradiction. God is not hate. And a lot of things, you can go very far with that, but we can never fully define God because it's beyond our human comprehension. And then as far as being humans and us being finite, I think how I would say that is we're creatures. We are created by God. We're part of this universe that God created. But as human, we're a special kind of creature because we are a composite body and rational soul, meaning we have a spiritual soul that's subsistent. It has its own existence. Independent of our body, even though it's natural to be united with our body. So we kind of have like a part in the spiritual world and a part in this physical world. And so God loves us and draws us to him, and our life is to learn more about God so we can love him more and ultimately be with him forever in heaven. So I think that's how I would put all your question together.
Andrew, I'd like to send you a copy of a book that we have by Kevin Vost, who we lost this year, but wonderful writer. It's called What is God? And a lot of this Aquinas that Dr. Stacy Trasancos was just kind of giving a hint of, he gets into more deeply there. So if you'd like the book, What is God? Hang on, and Edgar will get your information, and we will send it out to you. We're talking about faith and science. If you've got a faith and science question, we've got one line open. We'll try our very best to get you on with our guest, Dr. Stacy Trasancos, 888-318-7884. Going now to Peoria, Illinois. Gene in Peoria, listening on 94.3 FM. Glad you're here, Gene. Go ahead with your question for Dr. Stacy.
Thank you. As I was listening to the gentleman who was talking about the three-parent child, I was thinking about a movie that came out quite some time ago called Jurassic Park. You may remember, and the character of Jeff Goldblum came up with. He had such a brilliant thought, and that is that science is moving so fast to find out what we can do. We haven't slowed down to think about it enough to figure out whether or not we should. And I think perhaps ethics has not received the attention and the consideration that it should.
I think you are going to find agreement in Dr. Stacy. Dr. Trasancos, what do you think?
Thank you so much for saying that. I mean, it's really fulfilling to hear you say that. My husband was quoting that very same line to me the other day in the kitchen, where we do a lot of our work. We do a lot of work in the use of aborted children in research, fetal tissue research. And I'm writing a book right now about the history of it. And I have to take a break sometimes because I can't keep reading scientific paper after scientific paper talking about how they put the corpses of these aborted children on the lab bench and dissect them. And I was reading papers where they weren't even waiting till they were dead. They were taking them out of the mother's womb and using them as a biological machine for 10 minutes before they killed them. And the dissecting them is what killed them. And this was like in the 70s. And we were talking about that. Like, we're so far down the road with fetal tissue research right now. I feel like it's almost futile to try to tell the world we shouldn't be doing this, because they say, well, if you're going to abort the children anyway, it's more ethical to use their bodies in research than to throw them away and waste it. And you're just like, you're missing the whole point. It's very disturbing. So, I mean, there's so many ethical issues, and you're so right. And I'm in my 50s now, so I've learned not to get too much into despair. I've learned not to get too upset that we live in a fallen world. It just is. We just have to keep speaking. More people need to go study bioethics and become educated on the nuances of these debates and these arguments, and just be like this. Just keep talking, keep saying it, keep telling people. And, you can find ways to do it where you don't make everybody mad all the time. But sometimes you do need to make people mad. Sometimes you just need to be that trusted person people can come to when they realize they shouldn't have done something. But you're so right. And the things going on in technology are one thing, but the things going on in bioethics are, I don't know what I'm afraid one day we're going to have cloned humans walking around who were created for no other reason but for research. And it will fall to Catholics to figure out how to teach the world how to love those people.
But, right. And everyone deserves that love. That's why this is the horror, is because that child, that dissected child, deserved to be loved and to have a life. Gene, what a wonderful point you made. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Gene.
And if you ever want to call and quote Jurassic Park again, any other part of it, you're very welcome here. Alan in Missouri, listening on the Covenant Network. You are up next, Alan. Go ahead with your question for Dr. Stacy Trasenko, scientist and theologian.
Thank you. So my question was kind of about carbon dating, and I don't know. I think it is still legit, but there's apparently some. I think they're not Catholic, but some Christians that put up a website about proving it wrong. I haven't got to see it yet, and it's hard to find, it seems. But would it be rude of me to maybe not quite believe it as much as I did before, or should I stick with what we've?
Okay.
Learned about carbon dating.
Yeah. So what about that doubting science, like the science of carbon dating, for example? Where do you come down on that?
Well, carbon dating is another one of those things where you're kind of like, picture yourself with your eyes closed, probing into the dark, trying to figure out what you can find. And it's a very well-developed science. It's just that when you have a sample, it's more difficult to analyze sometimes, because you dig something up out of the ground. Well, how old is it? What else was around it? What else happened to it? But carbon dating. So I want to say this an aside. The radiometric dating and carbon dating itself, it comes from a process within atoms, their decay, the rate of decay, that is very, very, it's like I was saying about the cesium-133 atom and the jiggling electron that marks off how we count our seconds. It's a very faithful, a very predictable process. So if radiometric and carbon dating were wrong, everything we know about the atom would also be wrong. And if it were wrong, I'm not kidding, we wouldn't be able to make digital phones. We wouldn't be able to be manipulating atoms the way we do so well now. So we have a lot more to learn, but what we have learned, it works. We have gained knowledge of the atomic realm. And so the dating process itself is pretty solid. When you get into analyzing messy data, then there can be questions. But again, on something like that, like if you want to be skeptical about it, the church says that's totally up to our own judgment, whether we believe what scientists are saying or not. The church isn't going to tell us whether to believe a scientist or not. Personally, again, when it comes to things like that, I just take a wait and see. If I read something and I see what they're doing, if you read the scientific papers where they're actually analyzing the radiometric data, you get a sense for how messy the interpretation can be. So I just read that stuff. I take it as it comes. New information. I try to understand what they're doing. I try to understand what they're saying. Never in any of that do I ever think, oh, God might not exist. Or just because this is, I don't need science to shore up my faith. I come to science with a strong faith already. So I don't have really a reason, as far as my faith is concerned, to wonder about radiometric dating. That doesn't mean you can't disagree with what some of the scientists are saying, though.
I'm going to have to leave it there. Alan, thank you very much for the call. More calls on the line, but we got to take a break. We'll be right back and take more calls on faith and science for Dr. Stacy Trasenko. If you've got one, you are welcome here. 888-318-7884.
There's only one. Catholic Answers Live.
We have a big problem. Our culture is dying, and souls are in danger of being lost. The answer is conversion to Jesus Christ in His church. St. Paul Street Evangelization is a Catholic organization, and we have hundreds of teams spreading the good news throughout the country. But we need your help. The harvest is great, but the laborers are few. Find out more and get involved today at streetevangelization.com. That's streetevangelization.com.
EWTN Global Catholic Network is the largest religious media network in the world. 11 global TV channels, English and Spanish radio networks with over 500 AM and FM radio affiliates, one of the largest Catholic websites in the world, dozens of podcasts every week, social media, electronic and print news services, and EWTN Publishing. EWTN is the Global Catholic Network. For more about EWTN, visit EWTN.com.
Welcome back to Catholic Answers Live. Dr. Stacy Trasenko, scientist and theologian, is here with us. That sounds like superpowers when I say it that way. Scientist and theologian. It sounds like you should have some kind of a cape. But maybe you do. Maybe you do. I don't know, and I don't judge.
I have a cowboy hat.
Oh, that's right. You and the other Stacy have cowboy hats.
Exactly.
Because you have a friend, Stacy, and the two of you, are you still doing the podcast?
Yeah, off and on. We're taking a little break right now because I'm trying to write that fetal tissue book. But yeah, we're still Stacy and Stacy. She got me to wear turquoise jewelry. Like it's the only color of anything I own.
Oh, that's good. Well, she's very good then. I appreciate her efforts. All right, back. Oh, look at this. Every line full. Come on, people. Chris in California, listening on the EWTN app. Chris, we're glad you're here. Go ahead with your question for Dr. Stacy Trasenko, scientist, theologian, and cowgirl.
Oh, cowgirl too. Okay.
Yes.
So my question originally, I felt a little bit too emotionally involved with him, so I started to try and come up with a different question. My original question had to do with something like having a finding such as in atmospheric sciences specific to like Tyson tip and challenging somebody else's finding with observations while not really being in the scientific community and really not having much in the way of credibility other than just physical photographic evidence of an instrument that measured something. But I was feeling kind of emotionally involved with that. And I don't know that that's really appropriate to question you about. And so you made a comment about how to love cloned people, and I just was thinking about that. And the Uyghur in China, we understand, are a population that exists for organ harvesting forced by the Communist Party of China. So we have populations that are not clones, but we do, to some extent in the States, have some incidents where people have bargained off their or somebody else's organs. So that was challenging me to think about how to love somebody in somewhat of a situation like that. Being cloned for such a purpose was a challenging thought. But then my thoughts, bear with me, then my thoughts transition to something, it's scientific to the extent that Marxism was developed as a science. And I know that the church condemns so much of it, and I think it's critical to recognize that denying people private property, however little or great, is theft. It takes away from a person. I don't know which pope it was that said, to take away the fruits of one's own labor from one's own land, or even if it's somebody else's land and it's your own labor, there's theft involved, and that's just an injustice that should not be tolerated.
Hey, Chris, I hate to do this to you, but there's something funny in the line, and it's getting hard to make out what you're saying. Do you want to give Stacy a quick question?
Oh, maybe that's the fan in the background. Well, so the basic question is, what kind of advice do you have to people who do publish their own works, their own observations, but have something that is credible as an observation to put forward into, how do you get that recognized to challenge world records on these that have been standing and so on? Have you had any experience with that? Do you know anything other than having the World Meteorological go over the area where the finding has occurred to see if that in fact could actually happen?
So your question is, if you have a finding yourself, how do you get it out there? Is that your question?
Not in terms of self-publishing, but actually challenging without having any real credibility other than the finding itself, the observation itself.
Yeah. So just have it be accepted in the scientific community.
Yeah, I would, if you have something like that, find a scientist, find someone who would be able to analyze it, look at it, talk about it with you, give you an opinion. Maybe you find a handful of scientists and get several different opinions. But if it's a finding and it's got scientific value, if it's adding new knowledge to a field in science, then if you find the right scientist, that person can make it into a research project. That person can publish a scientific paper about it. So, it's true in scientific journals, they're not going to like I could not publish in a scientific journal today because I'm not working at a university in a lab. I'm working in my home writing and teaching. So you need to find someone who is in a position that could publish and talk to them and listen to their expert opinion too. And maybe collect, so it's kind of like going to a doctor, collect several opinions. But if there's something to it, then somebody might want to publish it. There's I can't promise that somebody will want to, but that's the pathway to getting it into a scientific journal.
Thank you very much, Chris. Sorry we started to break up there with you a little bit. Lots of folks on the line, so on we go. Patricia in Pennsylvania watching on YouTube. You are up next. Patricia, go ahead with your question for Stacy Trasancos.
Thank you so much. I had a sister who's passed on now, and she was told from a scientific standpoint that there are gay creations in the world, and that was authored by God. And I think that's part of what drew her to a certain comfortability about her own sexuality. And so I probably misheard what was said previously, but I thought she said, well, God is still creating and is still making, say, adjustments in his creation. And I thought, I hope I misunderstood that, because people could take that and run with it and say, so therefore, now we have people who can decide whether they're male or female or what their attraction is. So I just wanted to clarify that, and hopefully, I just misunderstood what you said.
Okay. I don't think I said God is changing human nature. I mean, God is holding everything in existence, is what I said. God is holding all of the electrons and all the atoms in your body in existence right now. Human nature is something that we have learned through philosophy and also through theology from divine revelation about the Holy Trinity. We came to understand our own spiritual powers of intellect and will through the divine revelation of the Holy Trinity. And then through philosophy, we came to understand that we're body and soul composites, the spiritual soul. So are humans still evolving? If that's the question, I don't know if scientifically there's an answer to that. I think there are people who say that humans have indeed evolved over the years. There's something about lice and fur or something that humans have evolved. They've evolved in their tolerance of milk, I think. So there can still be evolution, but I don't think the way it is right now, mankind has spread out throughout the earth, and we populate the earth, and we're clearly different from all the other animals. And that's where we are now. I can't really say what's going to happen in the future, but human nature is human nature. This is how we are. As it relates to the homosexuality, I think there are some people who really struggle with it, but I think that's very rare. Scientists have not found a gay gene. They have not found anything genetic that says you're just born that way. So that's all. We did a whole show on that one time, Cy, back in 2018, I think, on the studies on the gay gene.
I remember that.
So that doesn't mean, so I think at the same time, some people struggle with it, but I don't think there's a genetic basis for it, or science hasn't shown us there's a genetic basis for it. And so we're kind of back in that position. Well, what do we do then if somebody says, I'm gay? Well, we love them. We speak the truth, but we still love that person. You so many things you have to do that. You know the person is going to. I mean, sex outside of marriage is wrong, and so whether it's homosexual acts or whether it's heterosexual acts outside of marriage, it's wrong. So we have to love all those people, the people that are having sex outside of marriage for whatever reason. We have to lead them to the way to be happy, the way to live, to be fully human and practice virtue and seek God.
I just want to follow up on Patricia's question, because it strikes me that I think a lot of people are amazed, I'm among them, at how quickly the whole transgender idea became the idea that everybody has to hold. It became the vogue, and so much so that you hear really extraordinary stories of bullying of people who say, "Nah, I don't think so." You're not even allowed to say, "I don't think so." But it seems to me that there is no science here that like I can't think of anyone who's putting out a scientific study that says, it seems all vague, and we have this. It seems more like a religious belief than a science-based belief. This idea that, yeah, I'm a man, but my gender doesn't match with my biology. Those are two different categories. That seems like mysticism. That doesn't strike me as scientific in the least. But I wonder if you would agree with that or disagree with that, Dr. Trasancos.
Oh, I agree with what you're saying. It is perplexing to us parents. I mean, I've heard that the language around the transgender movement was specifically targeted at mothers to make them feel guilty into accepting it. And and I felt it. I don't understand it. I have literally asked people about it, and their answer is, in my mind, I can be whatever I want to be. It doesn't matter what my body is. And I mean, that's totally going in the wrong way philosophically. That's dualism, but it's like a super extreme dualism.
Yeah, right.
Where, I want to just, and I do say to those, like, why can't you just be, I'm sorry you don't think I'm sorry you can't just be loved like you are. I'm sorry people haven't convinced you that you're worth loving just like you are.
Yeah.
And
right.
I'm very worried about the health consequences too. This is a very, very troubling issue for me personally.
This is one of those, like the story that you told earlier about the baby, the unborn child. This is one where you cringe because you know that the 15-year-old girl, the 16-year-old girl right now who's being affirmed by everyone and getting affirming treatments and all that is going to be unable to bear children and is going to be physically scarred for the rest of her life because of all these loving and affirming people
who are poisoning her.
Yeah, right. So, like from a medical, from the perspective of a chemist, a science, like this is just poison that you're putting in an adolescent's body. That it's fair to say that you're just poisoning them.
They're convincing those girls that they're not good enough, just like they are, and so they're going to go through all of these surgeries and medicines and wreck their bodies. And long after those people who are affirming them are gone, those poor women are going to have to deal with the consequences of that surgery and those hormones. They're going to be left with, probably shorter lives. And it's very heartbreaking. There's so many things like that going on now. I know that Catholics feel worried. We don't know what to do. All I know to do is seek heaven yourself, pray hard, and speak the truth, and keep asking God what it is He wants you to do. I pray every day, God, grant me the grace to do your will, because I'm a mother of 7. I'm dealing with those issues, Cy.
Sure, right.
And it's very scary. I sometimes feel like that Maccabee's mother who the king murdered her 7 sons right in front of her. I feel like it's the frog in the pot, not to mix metaphors, but I feel like it's happening in slow motion in front of mothers' eyes now, that we're feeding our kids to this culture and it's butchering them.
It's, Stacy, so well said. Dr. Stacy Trasancos has been our guest. You should check out her book, Particles of Faith if you are at all interested in the conjunction of faith and science, not the battle between faith and science, but the conjunction. And the conjunction of the two is the human person who can have faith and can do science. Check it out, Particles of Faith. Dr. Trasenko, always a great pleasure. Love talking with you. Thanks for being here.
Thank you, Cy.
And that does it for us. I can't believe it, but it does. We'll see you next time, God willing, right here on Catholic Answers Live.